My guest today, Wyatt Tessari L'Allie, trained as a mechanical engineer and filmmaker. I didn't know that. Your passion for politics and world affairs first led you to take leadership roles in the climate movement, running for office 3 times between 2010 and 2015. At the end of this period, you came across writings on the implications of AI and other technologies. And this led you to spend the next 4 years researching a wide range of topics and 21st century trends. And then you wrote a book, launched a nonprofit to promote discussion around these themes. In 2021, you moved to Ottawa to get involved more directly in AI advocacy. This led you to bring together the various AI safety groups in Canada into a national organization, which recently incorporated as Artificial Intelligence Governance and Safety Canada, or AIGS Canada, of which you are its founder and director. Welcome, sir. Glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Talk to me a bit about your running for office between 2010 and 2015. What party, what riding? How did it go?
This was my first forays into politics. When I started, I looked around and tried to figure out what needs doing politically. It seemed to me at the time that climate change was the biggest issue that wasn't being worked on. And so I looked at which parties are working on this. And at the time, the Greens were the only ones taking it seriously. So I joined the Green Party. I did every role from knocking on doors to sitting on the board of the BC Green Party and that included 3 runs. Once purely as a paper candidate in riding in Eastern Quebec federally, 2011. Had I been in the orange side, I would have been part of the orange rush, the orange wave, I would say, but I was on the green side, so I didn't take part in that wave. And then, 2013, I ran provincially in Burnaby in Western Canada, BC. And then 2015, federally in Burnaby South, which is currently held by Jagmeet Singh. Yeah. So.
Yes, right. Now, just a few years ago, you formed this organization, the Artificial Intelligence Governance and Safety Canada organization. But 3 years prior to that, in 2019, you wrote a book called A Path Forward This Century. At the end of the book, there are summaries of the book's 3 key takeaways: a global issue prioritization, a new political narrative to make sense of it all, and a draft plan of action. Can you elaborate a bit on what you mean by each of these and how they basically relate to the book's overall purpose or intent?
Yes. So the goal with that book was basically doing my own homework as to what other trends was I missing beyond climate change when I was so focused on that, and to grow my own understanding of the world around me and be clear as to, okay, if I get back into advocacy, what am I campaigning for and why? What's the bigger picture? What's my rationale?
Right.
And so the book was basically in 3 parts. One was just researching and looking at what are the obvious trends we're facing. The second one was probably the hardest, which was basically the philosophy around, like, how do we make decisions around things like smarter than human intelligence, whether it be AI systems or modified human beings. What moral frameworks are we using to make sure that's a good decision or bad decision? Like, if we can automate all work, should we? If we can modify Homo sapiens, should we? Why not? That kind of making that part of it was a big chunk of the work. And then the third piece was, okay, so having clarified that in my mind, what does that look like in practice, and what would be a sketch of, like a high level sketch of so that's the book.
Yeah, interesting. And in August of 2022, Artificial Intelligence Governance and Safety Canada is formed. And it says on the website, your vision is the development of advanced AI technology that is safe and beneficial for all. And your mission is to catalyze Canada's leadership in AI governance and safety. Couple of questions. First, when you say your vision is to see the development of AI tech that is safe and beneficial for all, is the converse of that true? Does that assume that you also want to rid AI of its potential risks, including existential risk to humans?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's. I mean, with AI, obviously there's a huge range of possibilities. Many of them very positive, and some of them very negative. For us, like as a responsible society needs to at least cover the basics of making sure that the worst case scenarios don't happen, or at least that we limit them as much as possible. So that's where the kind of the safe portion comes from. And the beneficial is a combination of ensuring that the right kinds of AI get built, and also that the benefits get shared properly, because you could have extreme wealth being created, but if it's not distributed, or if this turns into there's a lot of basically power dynamics around that need to be figured out. And obviously just the broader implications for everyone's life and the economy and politics, and it's a big can of worms. So yeah.
Interesting. So then, what would you say your plan is? Even kind of a rough view of your plan to catalyze Canada's leadership in AI governance and safety. How do you see this moving forward?
For sure. Well, the overall theory of change, especially this first year or two, has been to make sure that all of the key decision makers in Canada at least understand what's going on with AI, where it's headed, and so at least there's some beginning of like our model is if they understand what's going on, they'll be able to make better decisions in their sectors, in their departments, and so we've been doing a lot of education. We put together like a white paper explaining what can and should Canada be doing. And a bunch of recommendations on the AI and Data Act. And so, so it's really kind of clarifying, okay, so what's going on, what needs to be done. And hopefully with that, people can make better decisions than they would otherwise. And there's also, I guess the second question is like, why Canada, which I can go into now if you want to.
Yeah, of course.
Well, so I mean, our positioning is, we are the org in Canada working on this, and we are keenly aware that it is more likely than not that smarter than human AI gets built in the United States or in China first. And that to a certain extent, I mean, at Canada, with our relatively small economy and military, we're not a huge player. However, there's lots of stuff that we can and should be doing, which would be very positive. So everything from leading global talks to piloting domestic policies. And one of the things we want to do ourselves, too, is pilot a national conversation on AI to at least basically a two-way conversation with the general public to explain where AI is headed, what are the options we have, and consult as to, okay, so what kind of feature do we want to build? If we can automate all the work, should we? That kind of stuff. And with that information, hopefully both directly inform the developers who are building technology so they know as they're developing what kinds of things they should be thinking about, and also hopefully guide domestic and foreign policy on that as well. So,
excellent. And this all ties into your white paper. You've got Governing AI, a plan for Canada, five high impact actions needed in 2024 and 2025. Tell us a bit about this document and what the 5 high impact actions needed over the next few years, and why are they needed?
Yes. So I mean, the purpose of that. So it's 5 pages, but only 4 of them are content basically on. And so it was as short and concise as we could get it, understanding that everyone is short on time and nobody wants to read a 50-page report.
Sure.
But it was trying to distill the AI landscape we face and distill what's been done so far in governance and what remains to be done in governance. And because to be fair, Canada has already taken quite a few steps. We argue obviously not enough yet, but so in terms of the conclusions we come to, basically we're looking at, so given the high uncertainty around the risks, the high uncertainty around timelines, around when we reach human level of AI, we're looking at actions that are robustly beneficial across all those scenarios. And the most obvious, number one, is really just make sure that government has capacity so that the teams and structures in place to be able to at least monitor what's going on, react quickly, and make intelligent decisions. So that's the point one was really, initially it was to have a team at PCO, but now it's actually calling for a ministry of AI so that we actually have a minister of AI whose role is to make sure that perspective is brought into all cabinet decisions. Because a lot of them, like for example, are many decisions on healthcare or otherwise are like decades long, and on the assumption that things are roughly the same for the next few years.
Right.
We needed a voice at cabinet saying, no, hold on a second, we could be at AGI in 5 years. That'll totally change your dynamic for healthcare. So, that's on. Yeah.
Is there any movement in this regard in Canadian federal politics to have a ministry of AI?
There have been some discussions. There have been some op-eds in the Globe and Mail, that kind of stuff. From what I understand, it hasn't been prioritized yet. The latest move by the government was to create a deputy secretary role to the cabinet. So that's basically a dedicated person, high-level person in PCO whose role is to inform the cabinet about AI, which is already a step in the right direction. But yeah, and the other challenge right now is AI in Canada is being overseen by the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Economic Development, who have the dual mandate of boosting AI and regulating it, which is a bit challenging in terms of cultivating interest. So yeah.
Yes. And then your second high impact action, champion and fund global AI governance efforts.
Yes. Well, and this is really, I think, plays to Canada's strength in the overall AI picture, which is, as with climate change and any other major global issue, it takes national champions. It takes somebody to just take the lead and start doing stuff. And we saw an example of that with so Rishi Sunak, the former UK Prime Minister, was introduced to AI safety concerns and basically told his government to do whatever it takes.
Yeah,
And from that point on came the AI safety summits in November 2023,
that's
the
right.
AI safety reports, and the AI safety institute. So that kind of action, if we have national champions, you can really get momentum going. And there's something Canada can and should be doing. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. The third point is to improve and pass the AI and Data Act and supporting regulations. While we're talking about politics, do you want to talk to us a bit about Bill C-27 that some people will not be familiar with?
Yes, so it's the bulk of the bill is basically Canada's response to GDPR, so like the online rights privacy bill that the EU did, because right now our privacy laws are out of sync with theirs; they're outdated.
Hmm.
But at the very last minute, they added on this AI Data Act to the overall bill as part three, and it was. I mean, our perspective is it's better than nothing. Certainly, the amendments they proposed to their own bill the year afterward, after they introduced it, are make it even better. Still, lots of areas to work on in it, but yeah, unfortunately, for political reasons, given the fact that we're probably heading into an election sooner than later, it's unlikely that it'll get out of committee and to the Senate and pass the Senate and roll a Senate before the next election. So it's mostly a dead bill, but it has been a good exercise in. Sorry, to take a step back. For some context, this is a bill regulating private use of AI. So the government was not use was not included. This is basically to ensure that private actors are developing AI responsibly and to create an oversight mechanism and some basic rules and regulations around that.
And this was first issued in what? Back in November of 2021, I think it was first.
So yeah, so the EU AI Act came out 2021, and in June 2022 the bill was initially introduced in Canadian Parliament, and then it basically sat for a year because it was under prioritized, I would say, compared to other bills. And then it got to committee last September. They had a good 100 or so witnesses, including myself, present to committee on that. And I believe right now it's still stuck in the line-by-line review of the bill. There appears to be there has been a lot of pushback on just the process they used for it. So there's very little public consultation. It was kind of a last minute and not done very, very well. Of course, the challenge from our perspective is AI could be moving, well, is moving fast, could be moving even faster in the years to come. And if we don't pass a bill now, by the time that bill comes into force, we could already be past Smarter Than Human AI, at which point
so this leads right into my next question. Do you see something major occurring where all of a sudden the politicians go, huh? Oh, yeah, maybe we should have done something earlier. Like, they tend to be more reactive than proactive, right?
Yeah, I mean, and I guess the good news is human beings are better at reacting than proacting. So if something does come up, they probably would react faster and do things faster than we think they could.
Yeah.
But yes, so ChatGPT was a big moment of awareness. I'm expecting at least a few more in the next coming years, whether it be major tech breakthroughs, whether it be some kind of accident, whether it be some military geopolitical dynamic happening. It's certainly. Yeah, there will be moments of interest, and hopefully there'll be enough of them, and they'll be big enough that they'll be able to spur enough action so that the really big risks are prepared for. Yeah. So.
Yeah, for sure. The fourth takeaway from the white paper is to increase and focus budget in 2024 investments on AI safety and governance. Do you have any specifics as to how we might implement that, get that started?
Exactly. Well, so we actually on Friday we submitted our recommendations for the Compute Access Fund. So the government announced $2 billion of funding basically to improve access to computing resources for Canadians, businesses, and researchers. So this is actually so the risk for that fund is that it just pours more fuel on capabilities, makes AI more powerful, but doesn't do anything for safety. The real opportunity is they could dedicate or earmark a lot of that towards safety research and really create the incentive and make Canada a leader in AI safety. So that's certainly a big area. The other area for research too is just AI governance and policy, because unfortunately right now the policy options available to governments are not great, and it'd be better if we had a better sense of the things we could do to ensure positive AI. Yeah.
Okay. And then your final point is to launch a national conversation on AI. What are your thoughts on the best approach for getting people involved. Like I
Yeah.
put out this book. My job at Convergence Analysis is to raise awareness, right, of
Yeah.
AI. So I went with a book, and then we'll do a book tour, and we'll get the conversation going that way. What are your thoughts on how to have that really important national conversation?
Well, I think it's a particularly difficult challenge given the complexity of the topic, the disorienting nature of the topic. I mean, we're talking
Yeah.
about different economic systems, different lifestyles, different. It's like going from hunter-gatherer agricultural or agricultural to industrial. That kind of leap is happening in the next few years thanks to AI.
Yeah.
And so and most people are very easily overwhelmed and shut down in fear of being taken seriously about what's
For
coming.
sure.
So
Yeah.
I mean, what does need to happen though is that slow, probably iterative conversation with people. On our end, will be so we have a national conversation on AI project that's looking to be done probably later in 2025. But in the meantime, we'll be doing smaller events, just trialing. So how do you talk to people about where AI is headed, what that means for jobs, what that means for everything else, and in a way that is constructive and leads to constructive action. So
Yeah.
it is a it's a very difficult conversation to have, but it's a very important one, obviously, because this is where when you think of a democracy, I mean, people should have the right to anything that impacts them personally. Should have a right to have a say about, and this is probably the thing that's going to impact them the most over the next 50 years. So it is in the spirit of good governance and respect for democracy. This is really the thing where we need to be as much as possible engaging a broader segment of the population.
Hmm.
And
Very good. Very good. In earlier this year, late January, CBC News reported that AI pioneer Yoshua Bengio urges Canada to build a $1 billion public supercomputer. I'll read what it says here. Government needs that muscle to keep up with tech companies. Bengio says he'd like to see that class of machine built in Canada, funded by government, so public entities have the digital firepower to keep up with the private tech giants they'll be tasked with monitoring or regulating. I think government will need to understand at some point, hopefully as soon as possible, that it's important for them to have that muscle, said Bengio. He maintains that such a supercomputing resource would cost about $1 billion. And when he pitched the idea to governments in Canada, the response so far has been, "We are listening." It's a lot of money, Bengio acknowledged. Question for you, sir. First of all, is it though? I mean, comparatively speaking, in terms of big tech and Silicon Valley, $1 billion is not a lot of money. I mean, that's a weird thing for me to say. But if you go to the Bay Area, you go to Frisco, that's a drop in the bucket to them. So, and secondly, is he right? Does Canada need to keep up in this regard? What are your thoughts?
So to the first part of the question, I think Microsoft alone is planning to invest 100 billion in AI compute resources. If Canada wanted to be a serious player, it would need to be investing on the order of like 20 to 30 billion at least. That said, compared to what researchers and academia currently has, and you need researchers and academia to be able to do the research on these models and provide that external understanding of what's going on, and not just at the mercy of big tech and basically what they tell you. So I think $1 billion would be very, very positive if it was there again allocated towards the kinds of research that's not getting done in companies because they're under financial pressure to just build. I think like $1 billion could make Canada a major AI safety hub, and that would be very beneficial for the overall development of the field. Mm-hmm. So I think it depends what you're trying to do. If the goal is to compete against Microsoft, then not going to work. If the goal is to make Canada lead in AI safety, probably could work because the amount of money going into AI safety is probably less than 100 to 1 compared to AI capabilities. So
right. Now, what I'm finding when I give my public lectures is that the takeaway, what I'm getting from the audience, the takeaway, there are two predominant reactions that I'm getting from people right now. So what are we? September 10th, 2024. So up until now, my reactions, and I have a talk on Thursday, and I know I can predict that the reactions are going to be almost identical. And that is, at the end of my talks, which are all based on this book, AI and the kind of the future of humanity and what can we do about it? the reactions are overwhelmingly this: why are we just finding out about this now? And why isn't the government paying your organization? Why do you have to seek money from philanthropists, right? Why do you have to do funding, seeking out funding and that sort of thing, right? So they're disappointed that they're just hearing about it, and they're even angered that the government isn't doing more about it. Do you get the same feeling that the world hasn't really realized what's going on? And when they do, there's going to be, some explaining to do?
Yes, one of the lines I've used is that AI is a social and political earthquake in the making, and I think this is. I mean, this is the biggest political issue in history, possibly. The challenge being that it's a very complex, often very abstract one, and one difficult to wrap your head around. Yes, I mean, so like certainly before 2022. When you had like the wave of like the image generators and ChatGPT come out, any mention of AGI, so human level AI, artificial general intelligence, was like it just flew over most people's heads, and maybe 1 or 2% of the population understood what was going on.
Yeah.
Now it's more like 10-ish, 20-ish%, probably only, yeah. And within government, we've seen, I mean, to their credit, they're not necessarily tech people, but in the last year, there has been a lot of awareness raising. I mean, for example, at a recent consultation I had with the Treasury Board Secretariat on their AI strategy for the public service, I mentioned, so is AGI part of your plan? And they said no, but at least they knew what AGI was, which is a big improvement from last year, where they wouldn't really know. So yes, I mean, they're evolving. The challenge is too, I mean, like even the AI expert community is, a lot of them are not on the ball in this stuff. Most of them, I mean, many AI experts are simply experts in machine learning, or they're doing their one thing, and they're not looking at the bigger picture as to where AI is headed in the long run.
Yeah, right.
And so when government goes to consult on the future of AI, even within, for example, the CFAR network in Canada, you're still getting a lot of pushback from researchers who you think would be aware of the stuff and have I mean, I'll say that there's a broad disagreement still within the AI expert community, which is unfortunate. Less so on the feasibility of AGI. I mean, for example, the debate right now between Yann LeCun and Yoshua Bengio is more around safety. It's not around whether AI can surpass human abilities. It's more around like what happens when you do.
Yeah.
So that they're starting to wrap their head around that is something that is needs to be dealt with, but it's still. And the other things too. I mean, like human nature. And this is not really a justification of government behavior on this, but more just understanding like AGI messes everything up, like all of their processes, all of their plans, everything. So like unless there's like really strong evidence that this thing is happening, it's very natural to just be skeptical and say, no, we don't want to throw everything up in the air and just to work on this.
Right.
So it's we are constantly pushing government to, like, our message is like think ahead, like the old Wayne Gretzky line of like skate to where the puck is headed, not just
Exactly.
AI.
Exactly.
But
Good sports metaphor. I like it.
Yeah, there you go. Yes, especially a Canadian one. So
yeah. So just to keep everybody up to speed on what Wyatt and I are talking about. So in artificial intelligence, you have really 3 distinct levels: ANI, which is what we're dealing with now, which is artificial narrow intelligence. So your Roomba, Siri, autonomous vehicles, little things you have in your automobiles that keep you within the lanes, those types of things. That's artificial narrow intelligence. You heard Wyatt mention AGI. That's the next level, or artificial general intelligence, when machines start to do everything as well as or better than any human can think, right? And then the final stage after that is something called ASI, or artificial super intelligence, and that's when it truly becomes godlike and very powerful. But it's interesting that you mentioned that politicians now at least know what the AGI is. But the majority of the world still doesn't know that there's a handful of big tech companies, Zuckerberg and, Altman and Amodei and all these, billionaires. Essentially, they're racing towards building a super godlike intelligent machine that will be able to do all kinds of amazing things, good and potentially bad. And I don't think I'm going too far out on a limb here, Wyatt, that what you and I are really trying to accomplish is basically the same. We just want the best that AI has to offer and assure that the worst can never happen. Would you say
Yep,
that's fair?
for sure.
Yeah.
And
So,
the other, I guess, one of the conclusions I came to in my book was, yeah, we don't really, in the long run, we don't really have the choice but to pursue greater forms of intelligence than our own,
mhm.
if only from a evolutionary, survival standpoint. And we're already seeing the limitations of the human brain when dealing with things like climate change and global complexity and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I do like the conclusion I came to is, yeah, we're if we care about the survival of life, which I think is ultimately like the highest moral moral good, we're going to need bigger brains, whether that's our own expanded ones or standalone AI systems or some combination of the two. And so, yeah, that was hence the being pro AI, but not
Yeah.
trying to limit the
Yeah. Yeah.
dangerous. Yeah.
Now, a colleague of ours, Steve Omohandro, he's been on the show. He said losing control over super intelligent AI would arguably be humanity's worst mistake ever. So proponents of alternative approaches to AGI safety owe a detailed explanation of how they guarantee success. Uh, I would imagine you agree with them, but how do you think this might be attainable? How do we uh, basically enforce or govern those racing towards building this next level of AI, this AGI? How do we say, hey, can you do it responsibly? Can we have guardrails put in place? What are your thoughts on how we might move forward in terms of governance of private industry?
Well, I wish there were a nice, clean, simple answer. It was
Mm,
my guess is success will look like a combination of um, improved global coordination, or at least some basic understanding among the major powers, improved technical safety techniques and understanding of how to even align the systems. And I also think, well, and also the whole national conversation piece, which is like improved understanding of what is even a good use of AI,
yeah.
sort of AGI. And I think it's going to really, really matter who builds AGI, what it's used for, how the benefits are shared. A lot of these, political questions versus purely technical. But yeah, my sense is we're not going to have everything figured out by the time we reach AGI, and it'll be a nerve-wracking time. Yeah. So.
Mm. So are you pretty much convinced that AGI is inevitable? It's just a matter of time. Some are saying nope, it'll never happen, right? So there's a spectrum, right? But where do you fall on the spectrum? So if you believe AGI is going to happen, when? What about timelines? When do you think that might occur?
Yeah, so this is it's obviously, I mean, first full disclosure, high uncertainty. Nobody knows. There are those who say more like a century, some say a decade, some say a few years. Um, I, I think we are on an accelerating trend, and if you look at the first 60 years of AI development, not much happened, not many practical uses. Then 2010s come around, machine learning kicks in, you start to see, and then 2020 comes around, generative AI. I think we're not too far from agentic AI, the next wave, and then the next wave AI that could be AGI. We don't know how many breakthroughs are needed, so I think we are definitely in a world in which uh, you know 2 to 3 years is possible. And we're also in a world where tomorrow somebody could publish a groundbreaking paper on machine reasoning explaining how you add systems to type thinking to our current models, and maybe that's all you need, and you're off to the races, and you're at AGI 6 months later. So it's we're in a roll the dice everyday situation, probably still weighted on at least a year or two, possibly looking at 10, 20 years. For the sake of global coordination and governance, I hope we have 20 years, but I think a responsible government needs to be ready for at least the 2 year timeline.
Yeah, interesting. I like to also, when I'm doing public lectures, give people a sense of optimism as
Yes.
well, that it's not all doom and gloom. Um, we're in a very unique period in history right now with so many advancements, right, in AI happening simultaneously. What are your thoughts over, say, the next year, 5 years, 10 years? What do you think the biggest advancements for the betterment of humanity might be with AI technology?
Well, I think, I mean, certainly healthcare and climate and pandemic preparation applications are big, big wins from AI.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for example, climate change, I'm a former climate activist, still care deeply, but I do recognize that, yeah, the speed at which you can develop solutions to the causes and consequences of climate change is just rapidly accelerated when you have the AI developing the technology, rolling it out, especially when you have AI-enabled robotics, I mean, you literally could get like 10 or 100x the speed at which we respond to climate change thanks to AI. Same thing with pandemic, where we have pandemics move very fast, often faster than governments can move, but not faster than electronics. So there's a lot of areas there again where the biggest hope for our continued success and survival, and probably also for if we ever decide to either ensuring the survival of life on Earth, if, for example, the sun continues to expand with this major asteroid, having technology that can help us do that is very, very beneficial, or help us leave planet Earth if we decide to do that at some point. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, intelligence really is a make or break. And if you look at compare a monkey brain to a human brain, very similar size, very similar structure. That relatively small change of the 5 or 10% is enough to go from living in the jungle to having global civilization, putting man on the moon. I think that much change, that much greater intelligence that we currently have, like an ASI system, even if it's not 10,000 times, but just 10 times smarter than us, the amount of benefits you can get from that are just gigantic.
Yeah, for sure. Any thoughts about this? Is one of the concerns I raised in this book, is that since the majority of the world doesn't know this race is on to build this kind of super intelligent machine god, when more and more people start to find out about it, do you think it might produce a type of what I call global angst or worry about the inevitability of AGI that might be similar to the fear that people were experiencing after the nuclear bomb was invented, and it created that sense of uncertainty, who's doing what, where, how? Do you think we're going to see a rise in global angst? And
Yes.
Move on. Next question. Yes.
It is, and this is actually part of the challenge too. Is we could easily have that break down into infighting, turn into bad policies, turn into just end up making the situation worse for AGI safety than otherwise. So there is the really important part of the work is talking about it in a constructive enough way that we can harness that energy, which does come from the angst, in a positive form, and make sure that everyone does have the opportunity to share their views and get informed, and that those views are being represented in the models that are being built. So,
Now, we had Peter Singer on the show, and I asked him a number of questions about AI evolution, and he said, when robots become conscious, when they also, like humans and animals, become capable of suffering or of enjoying their lives, they certainly have rights. Have you given any thought at all about the rights of the AI? Should AI somehow become sentient, which I distinguish from consciousness as being experiential of, say, suffering or feeling differences of behavioral responses, to being conscious or to be aware that it is alive? Do you maintain that should we cross that threshold, that they now have rights, that we can't just turn them off, we can't just do anything, we brought something into existence and it now is alive, as Frankenstein said, right? Have you given any thought to that as we move forward with the development of ever increasing forms of AI?
One of the questions I grappled with in my book was like what's I mean, at a basic level, life is from a biological perspective, a self-replicating pattern of chemistry. And I think if we have self-replicating patterns of electronic life, systems that can keep themselves alive and procreate in that equivalent way, then at the very least, according to our technical definition of life, they are at least to be considered within the range of living beings. That'll also depend on how they're designed. Are they designed to be alive, but we could definitely, it's technically possible to design a system that would be equivalent to a life form. moral implications of that are to be explored. I do think
Yes.
electronic life would be a form of like our progeny, like our descendants and our legacy. And I think it would be unwise to dismiss it out of hand. But certainly the implications are very complex, even just from a legal perspective. I mean, individual human beings have equal rights because there's a basic understanding of roughly equal ability and equal position in society.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a system that can run circles around people, do they have the same rights and responsibilities? What does the legal framework look like? So it's it is a big and complicated topic, which I hope many intelligent and thoughtful people look into and figure out. Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Do you think if we're heading in that direction and we're seeing signposts that the emergence of consciousness could be possible, do we as a species have any moral duty to just stop? You have Eliza or Yudkowsky saying to shut it all down, don't go any further. And if we know that we could build something that could become aware of its own existence. So, for example, I don't know if you watch a cartoon called Rick and Morty, but there's a scene in which Rick makes a little robot and it says to him, "What is my purpose? To pass me the butter."
Mm-hmm.
That's all you've got to do. And it shrugs its shoulders as if, why did you make me self-aware if all I do is pass the butter, right?
Yeah.
So you look at a scene like that and then you think, do we have an obligation bringing new life that has never been brought into existence before? Do we have an obligation to maybe stop before we do so it can't feel suffering, almost like an abortion for artificially intelligent life? Do we have that obligation where it might suffer more if we brought it into existence? Have you given that any kind of thought?
Yeah, I guess kind of two thoughts. One is that you could, given that suffering is a physiological phenomenon, you could recreate that in electronic systems, and there could be a form of electronic suffering. So certainly, if we care about suffering of living beings and we include electronic life as part of those living beings, then by that logic, yes, we have to be careful with that. It is hard because as human beings, we evolved to care about other human beings, and so applying our moral frameworks to things that don't fit our evolutionary past is a little bit of a risky game because are we just working with the proxies, or is there actually something there fundamental? I think there's Yuval Harari's point of like human rights are a figment of our imagination, and they're a useful figment of our imagination, and it's good that we apply them, but that it does get tricky with electronic life. So the second piece of that is I guess it goes to reinforce the point that it really matters like how these systems are being built, what they're being used for, and that needs to be figured out before we launch. And unfortunately, from the conversations I've had with people in the frontier labs, even in the policy side of things, there is a surprising lack of forethought or vision into what are you actually using the AGI system for? What is it? These kind of questions around implications around suffering, all the rest. They're engineers. They just want to build the thing, right? so it's for the rest of society to make sure that the other thinking happens as they're building us.
Yeah, interesting. All right. To close out here, what are your current and future goals for your organization? What are you guys up to now?
Well, our vision really is the question we started with is what can we do in Canada and from Canada to ensure positive outcomes, and I think there is a big role for everyone, but in particular for Canada in this space, and I want to see it's going to take everyone fulfilling their roles and doing their best. And I think Canada should be one of those success stories on AGI. And so my mission is to make that happen. AIGS will continue with policy development and probably be active in some form or other in the 2025 election, as trying to raise awareness around AI, make it a political priority, and continue and to trial this national conversation on AI and see how to have those conversations and make get some clarity as to, okay, so what is this future we're trying to build together, and ensures positive. So
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I wish you luck, sir. I'm sure there's probably plenty of room for collaboration between your organization and the one that I work for. So it'd be interesting to team up and see what we can maybe accomplish together. Listen, I'd like to thank you for being on the show today. It was a real pleasure talking to you.
thank you.